This isn't your average theme park. It's fantasy made real. Gears, grime, and world building collide in a land so detailed, you'll forget it's a game. In today's video, I'll show you the tricks I use to make this area almost addictively detailed. Alright everybody, welcome back to another episode of Planet Coaster 2. My name is Zelucious, or Luck, whichever one works, whichever is fine. Today's episode 12, and we are groundbreaking on a brand new area of the park, which I've alluded to for the past couple episodes, and I could not be more excited. So today we're going to be starting work on the harbor. It's going to be a steampunk harbor kind of thing, hopefully getting a lot of rides packed into this area, making it feel super dense, and building a really unique atmosphere. And depending on the intro cinematic or whatever I decide to do there, hopefully you've seen that I've achieved that. This is me speaking before I even know what this looks like. But in any case, we are going to be building this crane and starting off with this ride structure, meaning that the crane is going to sit on top of this flat ride, and this flat ride is going to be an actual part of the scenery rather than, being themed and having its own scenery. It's going to be built in, so that's going to be exciting and also challenging because I had never done anything like that before. What you saw me building there earlier on the back wall in the background there with the that gray metal wall was me trying to create an ADA compliance slope. As far as ADA compliance, I actually looked it up this time instead of guesstimating. So apparently a path may contain a slope of 5% or a 1:20 ratio. And anything steeper than that is then considered a ramp and has, more strict ADA compliant guidelines. And I wanted it to remain a path. I didn't want it to become classified as a ramp because then you need to have handrails and landings, and it's a whole ordeal. And it doesn't look as good. So I originally looked up that there was a max slope you could have of like 1 to 48, right? A crazy, crazy shallow slope. But then, apparently I can't read, and that was the lateral slope, meaning from like left to right as you're walking up the main incline. That slope cannot exceed 1 to 48. Now the grade that I made in the background is 1 to 48, which is a bit too gentle. Well, it can't be too gentle, right? But I could have gone steeper if I wanted, but I actually ended up liking this steepness a lot better than maybe a 5-degree slope would have been. So in any case, that area will not be touched for a while because we're going to be filling in the area between the crane and the main street where we left off last episode. So that's what we're going to be doing today on the waterfront. Oh, and you see here, I'm checking for collision with the frame, and the ride swings up way higher than the frame I was building and the crane height. So I'm going to have to readjust that. But anyway, back to the slope. All that path back there was me trying to go up by 1 meter without having to need landings, and this satisfies that, so there's no need to change it, and that's okay. In case anyone was wondering how I made a slope like that, I just used the in-game measurements, so each wall piece is 4 meters, and then you can count out how many you want based on how steep you want the slope. So I put 12 of them because I wanted it to be a 1 to 48. Right? Then I made it go up 1 meter, turned on its side, and technically the 48 is supposed to be the run, not the hypotenuse. So if you want to get all technical, it's 1 to 47.98. But there's many, many, many more pressing issues at hand. Like this crane. It's like already built and I haven't even talked about it. So while building this crane, I knew I wanted the queue to go around it, and that way I could take full advantage of the fact that it's on the water and just have the queue scenery being the fact that it's on the water. So on your left side, you're going to look at the water, and on your right side, you can see the ride while it's working. And I thought that'd be pretty interesting to look at while you're in the queue, so it wouldn't be boring. But being on the water, I had to decide whether I wanted it to have like an oil rig set up with like large metal beams or something submerged into the water to hold it up, or if I wanted, a solid concrete foundation. And if you saw earlier in the time lapse, I eventually ended up settling on having a solid foundation because, like everyone knows, okay, Kranplätze müssen verdichtet sein, okay? Everyone knows that. What is this, amateur hour over here? Obviously, we had to have the ground compacted underneath the crane. There's a total of 3 people that are going to understand that reference, and that's okay, because if you know, you know. But anyways, in building this crane, I tried to make it work as realistically as I could without, looking up all mechanical engineering aspects and principles that I don't know. So without doing all that, I tried to make this work. For example, the upper platform is attached to the base only at the center on a rotating joint, and then that'll allow the crane truss tower to rotate side to side. And then the gear mechanisms on either side of the crane should allow it to move up and down, but that's mostly for decoration. And I put the gears on rotators, which I cut out of the time lapse because it looked terrible sped up. It was really hard to watch while editing, so I cut it out. And that's saying something because a lot of this time lapse is pretty choppy and unsmooth. And I think because of this build being so, mega, it's so big, and it's a statement piece, so I had to view it from every angle, and as a result, I looked around after placing every single piece, I think. So I have the utmost respect for creators who can make smooth time lapses. But back to the gears, so they move and everything, but that's just for show, because along with the crane truss, there's also a winch and cable mechanism channel pulley system thingamajig that allows the main hook block to move along the length of the truss. So this means we have movement capabilities in any angle and at any radius away from the center. So that means that we should be able to grab anything within the max radius of this crane. And that's good enough for me. Something I wondered is if a crane like this could actually be both scenery and functional. Like, let's say the coaster maintenance bay is nearby. Can we use the scenery crane to lift the trains off of the track for maintenance? Or is that too expensive? That might be too expensive to actively need to maintain and inspect it, because, it's going to be outside and exposed to the elements 365 days a year. And it's also got so many intricate details on the frame that would also need to be inspected for wear and tear. Yeah, it's probably unrealistic to have this crane actually be usable, but wouldn't that be cool? Alright, well, the next area is us working on the very first building for this new region of the park. And I don't know why I kept that clip of me editing the dock area. That would fit in the next chapter a lot more naturally, but I guess this is chronological order, so we are going to just keep that in there and just roll with it. So yeah, this building right here, it's going to be the first building and probably the only building I include in this time lapse, or in this video at least, of me time lapse building something in this style. Specifically, I chose this one because it featured some pretty, iconic elements that really stand out for this architectural style, as well as some cool techniques that I wanted to show you guys. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm making the pretty intricate window framing, and not all of the buildings in this area are going to have this. I just wanted this first building to do this as sort of a proof of concept, so that when I build later buildings and stuff, I know what's possible and what I can take from this building, essentially. So the first thing was those custom window frames. The intricate designs make it look very intricate and expensive. Next are those lamp things, which I got from a creator named Jude Linquist. I've talked about this creator before, and I'm probably going to keep referencing them for the whole duration of me building this section of the park just because their work with steampunk in Planet Coaster 2 is ridiculously good. So I'm once again going to link them in the description, and maybe I won't do it every video, but this for certainly in this video it'll be there. And right now I'm making the building. This architecture style, do I even know what it's called? It's like, you know, you look up Victorian steampunk, the Victorian fantasy steampunk type of vibe, and this is kind of what comes up, or one of the things that comes up. There's a wide variety of different ways you can interpret a steampunk area, and this just happens to be one of them. This is one of the more opulent options, and I thought that was more fitting because it's right next to our Pellish Castle, right in our main street, so it's still pretty nice looking. It makes sense being right here. But as we get further into this town, into this area of Tazwell, you guys are going to see that it is going to get pretty grimy and grungy, which I am pretty happy with. And now I'm working on the interior. Well, interior I say with quotes because I'm just using screens. Like, it's all screens, always has been. This is a trick I used in Planet Coaster 1, which I felt was pretty viable here, considering the square footage, like interior wise, of the building here was pretty small. So just having the screens in there and then display an interior with the one screen sharing two windows, so it kind of is parallaxed. It's a game dev hack actually. It makes it look like your buildings are like dynamic and have full interiors, when in actuality they're just an image that's kind of parallaxed, so it kind of looks like it moves as you move past it, but it's a lot easier on the engine to render and stuff. That's essentially what we're doing here. I'm saving on piece count by just having a singular screen, or 4 screens, to encompass the entire interior. So I guess the next question is, what is more extensive on the game engine? Is it one screen with custom media, or is it like 2,000 pieces worth of interior? If I had to guess, I'd say the pieces. Okay, well, this next area, it's not actually going to be called City Key, but that's what I called the chapter, and I got that name from a Cities Skylines asset called the City Key, and you could place it with a prop line tool, and it was fantastic. It was great. Really made your waterfront areas come alive. That's just why I named the chapter that. As you can see, I'm working on these little extensions of land that stick out into the water, and I didn't quite know what to call it, so I'm calling this a key. Do you say key or K? Quay? People also say quay, I think, but I say key. I've always said key. But in building one of these harbors, I actually looked up the difference between like a dock, a pier, a quay, a jetty, a wharf. You know, you don't really need to ever make that distinction between these things unless you want to be that guy, you know, that actually this is a jetty, this is not a quay, you know, unless you want to be that guy, but no one wants to be that guy. Since we have time to kill, I thought I'd be that guy right now. So technically we are building a quay here, and that is because it runs parallel to the land while also being on solid ground. This is supposed to be like filled earth underneath these platforms, but you know, if you're using the free camera and you just put the camera through the floor, you'll see a whole lot of nothing. Just empty space, hollow air. But the peeps don't have to know that. The guests can just walk on the solid ground and feel safe. Right now I'm making like a canal thing with like small bridges that are kind of unsafe, and to be honest, I saw some concept art that I really wanted to create there, so that's what that is, and it's really unsafe. That's why I put the netting underneath. There's no guardrails because it would ruin the aesthetic. Something like this could never exist in an American park, right? But since this is a German park, perhaps the people won't just walk into the ocean. Perhaps the people won't just walk into the water. I don't know. Alright, next. This is something I was looking forward to for a very long time. And I knew I wanted to put it in this area, Tazwell, but I hadn't built Tazwell yet until now. So we're finally working on it. And the German audience might know what this is. Right now I'm recreating one of the challenges from the game Schlag den Star, which is like I guess it's like a competition game show where the guy, I think it's like, his name's Hensler, right? He hosts, and there's like a celebrity that you're competing with, and there's various like mundane tasks that you have to complete competitively against the celebrity that's on the show. And I don't know, it's the most German thing ever that I could ever think of, and that's why I wanted to put it in here. And I know it's going pretty viral now because like brain rot streamers have like discovered it and whatnot, but I actually knew about this a lot earlier. I just didn't build it in the park yet because I hadn't gotten to this point, but it's a lot more popular now, so I think people know what it is. But basically the game I just made there is the one where the contestants have to perfectly slice an item in half, and then and then after which there's two scales and you have to weigh the two halves, and then the contestant with the closest or the smallest difference in the masses of the halves, you know, they would win the challenge. But anyway, I thought that was really fun to have on the port there. This area of the park is supposed to be like a bustling marketplace, not a wharf actually. There's a pier, a lower pier, there's a canal, there's a jetty, and there's a quay, and there's a crane, all contained by this harbor. So that's my limited knowledge of water structures, which I probably would have never ever learned the distinction between them if it wasn't for this project. So, you know, I learned something new. That's great. I want to talk about something that I noticed. So in the way that I build these areas, the reason why it looks so like eye-catching, eye candy, I guess, is because I don't really have like a big idea for a large area. Well, sometimes I do, but most of the time I'll see something I like and I will like incorporate something similar or try to be inspired by that, right? And then I'll do that a bunch of times until, and look at that piece of pier that sticks out. What is that? Until there's a bunch of disjointed ideas and areas, and then I'll just piece them together and try to make it more cohesive. So that's what you've seen me build. That's what you're seeing me build right now. I created the Schlag den Star area and a bunch of seating around that, and I created the canal with the bridges over it. Does that area make sense? No, but it's super unique and it looks cool, so that's why it works. And that's how that came to be. Even though I'm having some unrealistic things, I tried to root everything in realism. That's why you can see me making the handicap lift, which will bring guests down to the level of the ride so that they can experience the ride. And we're pretty cramped for space on the waterfront, so there's not really enough space for, let's say, switchbacks with ADA compliant ramp slopes, right? So a cargo lift works just as well. And you know, being an industrial area, moving cargo lift, it kind of plays into the scenery a bit, so you can theme it up, and it just made more sense to have an actual lift. And since budget is not really an issue in this park, I kind of built two of them because I didn't plan it well. But hey, that's alright. That's just more moving parts, that's more clutter, that makes this area feel more compact, and really it makes it feel messy. And that was the whole vibe I was going for. Super bustling, messy, grimy even waterfront district. This would serve as sort of the port of entry to the university town. Alright, well for this last area, this is going to probably be my favorite addition to the park, despite it being a last minute addition. And this came to be when I showed my friend the pier and they were like, yo, you should totally add some swans, like a swan boat ride. And I was like, you know what? You're right, I should. And I had to quickly think of a way to incorporate it into the area, into the story of the whole region. And somehow this last minute addition turned out to be the most themed part of the park so far. So right now I am building a swan made out of mechanical bits, and that's what this is, the mechanical swans of Machina Lake. You know, the steampunk area, lots of machinations, lots of machines. I decided to call the lake Machina Lake, and well, now they're being inhabited by mechanical swans. And I could tell you the story right now, but I actually have got something else in the park that will probably do a better job of that. So you just hold on to that idea for now. And instead we're going to be building these swans out of smaller pieces. And I had to generate some AI images to look at for an idea like this, because I know AI is bad and all, you know, but sometimes a concept just doesn't exist. So you need to create it and then take some inspiration from it. And then obviously you cannot copy it because AI things don't really make sense as of right now. But who knows? AI is getting really scary. So maybe in a few years, AI stuff is going to be like, it's going to make sense. And that's how you know society's doomed. But anyways, I'm going to be making these swans, and as you can see, I started off with a very pretty template of regular swans, like a regular swan ride. Oh, I forgot to say, this ride is built on top of the, I guess it's an in-game like two-seater dark ride, tracked ride in the game. So you can attach pieces to that, and the design with its like leather seats and its fancy shape, it really lent itself well to be used as a giant swan ride like this. So I took the one from the workshop, and I will link that in the description because it's very beautiful and it would fit in a lot of parks. I just wanted to be unique, so I had to make my own. But I used the stencil here basically for like shaping, because I'm not really good at that. I can detail something, but doing an organic shape, like creating a living swan shape, I can't really do that. That's pretty difficult. So shout out to whoever made this in the workshop, and I will link it below for the original swan. And this one I'm just trying to get the shaping in with the smaller pieces, and you know, it's not as many pieces as you might think. Like, yeah, I placed each individual feather, but it's not as many pieces as you might think. Maybe I'm just numb to piece spam because of how often I do it, but one of the key things I was thinking was like, okay, if I'm gonna place each individual feather by hand instead of using the in-game wing pieces, I need to do it for a good reason. I can't just have them all be the same color. So I decided on having like different bits of metal, like different metal plates have been used and recycled and used for this project. So it's not just like a brand new manufactured item. This is like built in a scrapyard basically, with a bunch of scrap pieces of bronze, brass, iron, you know, really just like give it a scrappy vibe. And the problem with that is that these colors, they make it look like a duck, doesn't it? So off screen I'll show you in the live section, but basically I changed the color and it's supposed to be like a black swan but mechanical, so There's different tints of metal you can do to recreate that, and I'm overall pretty happy with the idea. So I've got a smaller live section before we head into the main one, and I'll let that play right now. Okay, so here we are with the progress on the swans. You know, I think it's okay. The hardest part here was trying not to make it look like AI slop, but in-game, you know? So this is the final result that we're gonna end up going with. They're kind of glitched into each other right now, but once they space out on the water, it'll be okay. If I hit play, you notice the only things that really spin on them are these things here. And I tried with like making them move like this, but it was just too complicated for my simple brain. Like, it kind of works, but it's kind of fidgety, and I don't have the patience enough to fiddle with the rotators like that. So this is the version 1 with the moving wings, which I kind of like, but at the same time it's way too complicated. So the swans with just this gear rotating and the static wings is going to be the final version. So let's go put these down in the main park. Alright guys, we're finally in the park, and it's time for the final live tour. There was a couple hours of time lapse that I just didn't end up putting in the video because this would have been an hour long. So we're just gonna dive right in. Immediately coming up to this area, you notice this first building here that we made in the time lapse, and you can see the different types of parallax windows that I used. Down here I used 4 different screens to cover 8 windows, and up there I used 8 different screens to cover the same 8 windows. And I can't decide which one I like better. I think down here makes the most sense to do 4 screens, but up there, maybe 4 screens would work better too. But let me know what you think in the comments. So moving along, here is our harbor. And as you can see, it's pretty noisy, which was kind of the point. I made the sign for Schlock Den Star live, brought to you by the university. You know, in practice, there's actually no reason for guests to come here besides to use the benches. But we know their pathfinding doesn't really work all the time. Like, they'll use that bench, and that's good, but if there's no reason for them to walk down this path, they probably will never use these benches. So hopefully, with the new guest AI update, that'll get resolved, and they'll actually... Whoa! Okay, I'll just shut up then. Okay, so this is actually working as intended, and there's people using the restaurant too behind. This is awesome. Here's our host guy, and the 2 tables. Lots of stuff in the back for them to cut in half. So this is supposed to be like a small version of like carnival games, right? That you find on a main street or something. Where guests in the park actually compete here and they can win prizes. Now that I think about it, I should probably add some prizes. Or maybe it's just like a gift card or something. This bench here is actually seating. There's people using the bridge. Oh, it's so good. So here I got a little innovative with the barriers. As good as these bollard and chain barriers look, I didn't want to spam them everywhere because they are pretty visually noisy. So only in a few key areas did I place them. You know, you get the point. It looks very dock, or it looks very pier. I tried to use these clutter boxes, and that made the barriers look a lot better. So people are less likely to walk down in this area. Especially here. There's a sequencer I can hit. If I hit that, you may notice something over here, and that adds fog to this area, which I have called Machina Mile now. Whoa. It's kind of like inspired by Batman comics. There's like an amusement park that exists on the water, and it's called Amusement Mile. So I thought I'd call this Machina Mile. Because this is supposed to be in Europe, that makes no sense, because what the heck is a mile? But I'm using it as a proper noun, not as a unit of measurement, so bear with me here. So now we're going to head down into the pier. Here's another handicap accessibility lift that I added. This lift is to access this ride down here, which has been named the Miraculous Mechanical Swans of Machina Lake. And that's a bit of a mouthful, but you can just call it the Mechanical Swans. I teased it with some posts on my channel, but I added a bit of theming or exposition into this ride. So here's the first bulletin board. You can pause if you want to read that. So it's kind of setting up the story. Then if we head into the queue, yeah, I added the speakers around to give like the waterfront and seagull sounds. So the ambiance here is pretty nice. This is another pier, but I changed the style. So that one has like concrete with steel beams. This has your traditional wood docking. And here's the second bit of storytelling. One of these is a Easter egg for the next coaster in the park. Now we head down to the waterfront, which is such a cool area. The only issue is that because of the height that the ride is at and the height of the water, we want the swans to be like bobbing on the surface level, right? So we had to sink the track a little bit to match that. But the problem is the track is at the same level as the boarding platforms. So if I were to move this whole station down, as you can see, people have to walk in the water here. But I use the station to kind of pretend that people walk up here, right? We're just gonna have to ignore these gates. I wish you could like remove them or recolor them. Bright white gates that can't be themed is like so obnoxious. Even Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 had themable gates. But anyway, I threw a lot of these life preservers around. So here are the swans. I ended up putting a different number on each one. And there's a total of 9 swans that can fill this circuit at a time. I could have added more, but then they started stacking, so 9 seemed to be the most efficient number. I don't know if it's a bug or if it was designed this way, but apparently only one rider can ride this at a time, which is horrible for throughput because look how popular the ride is. But this is the final look of the swans. I recolored it to be like black swans. This lake used to be home to a special species of black swan with red beak. And ever since the industry got put here, all this pollution made the water go bad and all the swans left. So someone in the community decided that they were going to reintroduce the swans, but a mechanical version because they missed the swans so much. That's the story of the ride. And I'm so happy this exists because it allows me to make use of this arch over here. Now the ride goes underneath it, and it's a pretty special moment. And now the guests are going to have access to the water. I needed some safety measures to ensure, if they fell in, they wouldn't be SOL, right? There's more life preservers. There's the occasional ladder system. So one here. Another one here. There's a few more on the other side that we'll get to. Additionally, we have this lifeguard boat. So I started using these posts. That way you can take a small piece of path, color it invisible, and then place the post on them, and then you can have like staff members actually standing out on basically nothing. And it looks like he's working this post, and if there's ever any issue, he could head into this rescue safety boat, and it kind of looks submerged. Okay, but you see that it's moving, and that's the same with all of these buoys floating in the water. And they're all just hooked up to this sequencer here. They're all just using staggered vertical movers. So if I take one of these modules, there's 2 movers that make it go up, down very slightly. And then that is connected to this radial. So it also wobbles while going up and down. And you get this pretty convincing effect, like they are actually bobbing in the water. And since this is set to continuous looping, I had to stagger them around, because I had them all lined up at the beginning, and if you stood right here, they would all bob up and down at the same time, which was ridiculous. So making them pretty random looking, it definitely adds a lot to the realism. This was such a no-brainer addition to the park, because from here, the water line is so low, you can barely even see the swans. You can see them from here, kind of, but from here, you can't even see them. So it's like they're not even there until you get to here. You're like, ooh, that's a cool ride. Maybe I should go check it out. Now we can take the exit. and we're back to this small area. This concrete pier here, it's only for this ride, but I think that's okay because you see how low capacity it is. We don't want a lot of traffic over here. It's like more of a low-key thing. Here we've got a boiler / water pump system, and this is connected to all the piping in there with a lot of moving parts. That gauge is actually taken from Jude Linquist, so again, I'll link them. They made a lot of really cool parts that fit the steampunk aesthetic, and this is one of them. We head back up. This sign says, "Welcome to Tazwell." So if you move along, you'll notice all of these light posts. This is from the workshop, and then this is that, but I just cut off all the extra lights. So it's a smaller variant. And then additionally, there's more variants with the colors. Like there's various bits of rust and aging, like the oxidized green one, slightly newer, but you know, it's getting a little weathered down. Some brand new ones, and the classic oxidized green look. You may have also noticed that I added a bit of grime to this area. So the litter here is not in-game litter. This is actually like the t-shirt prop piece shrunken down and placed upside down and stuff. And it gives a convincing look for litter. Also, I included sewer grates every so often, and around them, you know, a buildup of dirt, like the water has been draining and bringing that street grime and stuff to the grate. That's where it builds up. And I made this newspaper box too, and I made it kind of look rusted and old, and like people have been putting advertisements on it and stuff. So I'm gonna put this on the workshop actually. It's got a sample newspaper here that you can edit to fit any theme or exposition you're trying to put in your park. Same with these. I'll put these newspaper variants and stuff so you can have these in your parks. Now that I think about it, this is probably the most unrealistic part because, as we all know, Germans are very recycling oriented. It would probably be unrealistic for them to let this fly, right? All this litter everywhere. But this is to add ambiance, okay? It's supposed to feel nasty. Now this area is the exit as well as the handicap accessibility lift for the flat ride. So as you can see, we just head down and this lift brings them down. I should probably put a fence here, huh? We'll head around to the queue. But first, here's the entrance of the ride. There's no big ride sign or anything yet, just because I have not named the ride yet. That's why here it says ride name, because I don't know what to name it. There's a bunch of realism details packed in here. So in front of every queue, there should be a trash can for you to throw out stuff you don't want. There's one section of lockers here. There's a reason for that I'll explain later. A test seat, a ride height marker, a worker outside to answer questions. It's just a security post. And the ride safety info. And then this just goes around to this side of the queue. So if we head in, it looks so good, right? It's pretty like rickety looking, but it's sturdy. There's a lot of steel posts. We know the crane place is compacted underneath there, but the queue hangs over with those support beams. So if you color the path invisible, you get the effect that you're walking above water and you can see below. What I talked about in the time lapse, while you're in queue here, you can either look at the water or you can look at the ride. And either way, it's pretty interesting. And this just goes around the whole perimeter of the flat ride. And then this final covered switchback section is just filled with a bunch of clutter and stuff. There's only one block of lockers up there because there's bins on every corner of the ride. And I know like a Zamperla, like Giant Discovery, something the likes of Max Air at Cedar Point, right? That's a much more compelling ride type. The issue is that thing is like twice or maybe even 3 times the height of this one. So it just wouldn't fit with the whole crane structure. So I needed something smaller. That's why I chose this one. It's still a fun ride. It's just not a Giant Discovery. This is still the same ride operator booth that I used for the Swans. There's some power utility pieces there, as well as here, right? Ladders for maintenance to access the upper lift area. And the emergency shutoff right next to the exit. So now, some stuff you haven't seen yet because I cut out a lot of the time lapse. We have the engineering section of the university. There's a distinction because this is a research and engineering based university. So first, this building on the corner here, it wasn't really inspired by anything except the other building over there. So I kind of took notes from that, but I also just freestyled a little bit and tried to match the tone with a bunch of heavy brick, a little bit of gothic, but not too much, a little bit of industrial, a lot of industrial actually. And then if you can see up there, those are the same roofs I used in my 2-part series that I made covering the update 6 and whatnot when I made that Vekoma launch coaster. These are mansard roofs. They look pretty French. I was actually going for like a Second Empire type of style of architecture. It just screams academia, right? Like the French mansard roofing, it just looks like this is a school building. Like this may be an industrial warehouse, but over here we're getting to a school building. So just having that peak over the top, it kind of brings the look together in my eyes. Now we're going to start again at the resort entrance that we made last episode, because I kind of changed the gate a little bit. Look at that view. The first thing we see is the crane, so it's kind of lined up this way. That is intentional. To the left we have a gate for the access road, and then I themed it so it doesn't stand out in this area, right? But if we head through, there's a bit of staff path, so guests can't go back here. And this road is going to, serve as the service road for our coaster that's going to go in here. Now, as for the front of this building, we have the class of 1725 Memorial Superheater. What was the class of 1725 up to? I don't know. We just have to wait and see. Allegedly, this has been running ever since then. It's a big reason for all of the steam power around here. That is why it is, at the esteemed College of Engineering here. If we head underneath this overhang, you'll notice it's kind of grimy down here, right? Like, what is that green fog? That's due to that piece right there. So in the ceiling, there's this mist that I colored green, and it gives the dingy look. Like this area is... So believe it or not, it was actually inspired by Chicago. Like underneath the L trains, or I guess Lower Wacker, right? If you guys know about that. But I threw some of the same elements in here. Just more grime, more litter, accumulation of rust because this steam pipe is always blowing, a bunch of clutter between the building and the road. On this side, there's a tall wall to prevent people from falling into the lagoon, some big tanks, and then a power station tower thing. This is like another water pump. Maybe it's like desalination. I'll have to think more about the infrastructure here as we build the engineering section and get some more scenery in here, but this is where it ends for today. This is going to be the station building for our ride, and as you can see, I called it Hofstadter Engineering Hall. Hofstadter, that name is from the Big Bang Theory. It's a pretty German sounding name, I think, so I just threw it in there. Plus Leonard is a great character. If I name stuff after like Assassin's Creed characters, I can also do it for like pop culture things too, so that's what that is. Now I just need to figure out how I would name something like this in German. So if you have the translations for this or this, please let me know in the comments, because Google Translate is totally not sufficient enough and I just don't know. So here's the front of the building, right? It's pretty inviting, and if we head in, this is where lockers, queues, the gift shop, it's all going to be accessed through here. So up here in the building, I had these like metal girders surrounding these pipes, and then I made the pipes like bright red so they stand out more and you can see it from here. I thought that was a cool idea to have going around the roof trim. Like there's more industrial piping going on. And then, there's this tank here I got from the workshop. That was pretty cool, so I'll link that below as well. Some final notes of detail. I've added power lines connecting most of the structures anyway. So here to here, heading down to this mini tower thing. to power this light system. Again, on this side, power lines connecting back up to the observatory over here, and then back to the first building we made. I also changed the waterfront of this now, so I added these big concrete blocks as a foundation. I changed this window to now be like a sewer grate, and this larger Gothic window is replaced by a gear, because inside there's not a window, so it didn't make sense for there being one outside too. I think that fits a lot better with the whole area. You'll notice there's lots of steam leaks everywhere, and if I change the time of day, we can really look at these textures here. So wherever there is steam leaking, I added more rust, and I additionally recolored the bits to look like they're weathering and discolored, and I've done that all throughout this area. So that's why it took so long going back through and slightly changing the colors of different pieces, just to represent different amounts of wear and different exposures to like salty water. So that's just to keep the design language consistent. Here we've got some sewer grates, build up, more rust, again lots of discoloration around, especially here, like this bit of steam is leaking down here, so this is all discolored now. Maybe this pipe is leaking, so there's a bit of rust. I know the crane, it's a bit jarring at first. That's why I tried to add more tall structures around it, and as we fill in this area with taller buildings, it won't look as menacing as it does now. I may edit this section up here. It's just got a lot of greebling. This is an instance where all of the Lego building I did as a kid is paying off, because I'm pretty good at greebling. But yeah, that pretty much encompasses everything we got up to today. So to close, I will say that the next builds are planned. I just don't know which one we're going to do yet, and that's all dependent on the content of the next update. So when that gets reviewed, I will decide and we'll head to work. So with that, guys, that is going to pretty much be it for the end of the episode. I hope you enjoyed the sort of ambiance we built here. If you have any name suggestions for the crane ride, please let me know in the comments. Additionally, some proper translations for the College of Engineering and the Hofstadter Engineering Hall would be very welcome. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Notable stuff will be in the description, and that's all for me. So take care, and bye-bye.